thank you all so much for joining us and being our virtual dive buddies from all around the world. This is our very first Reefs Go Live of this season. Welcome to the Reef. Today we're broadcasting live from this gorgeous dive site called Eagle Ray Roundup, which is situated in the famous Bloody Bay Marine Park, just off the coast of Little Cayman, a teeny tiny island in the Caribbean with fewer than 200 people. I'm going to be your topside host for today, Fiona, and I'll be heading up the conversation with our underwater host, Katie. And Katie and the team below water, sorry for that little radio interference there, Katie and the team below water are actually wearing specialized scuba equipment, including a microphone and headphones, which means we can have a normal conversation and I can actually ask her your guys' questions throughout. So we'll go ahead and say hi to Katie now.
Good morning, everyone, and we're so glad that you're joining us here at Eagle Ray Roundup. As Fiona said, my name is Katie, and I'm going to be showing all of you virtual dive buddies at home or at school this incredible coral reef and teaching you a little bit about the connectivity and the interactions of all of the organisms, or many of the organisms, that we're lucky to have here on this reef.
Thanks, Katie. We also have a team both above and below water handling cameras, handling cables, making sure this whole operation runs smoothly. So throughout the podcast, you may hear us talking or checking in on them. So let's take a moment to say hi to those guys now.
Hi, guys.
Amazing. So a couple of things I want to mention just right off the bat. If you guys are joining us through Facebook or through YouTube, that's great. We're super happy to have you with us. But actually, the best way for you to join us on today's broadcast is through our website. And there is a link to register to watch Reefs Go Live in the video description wherever you're watching it. We actually prefer you use this link because it means we can interact with all of you better. So throughout the broadcast, we'll be receiving your questions live. We can also ask you questions of our own and send out polls, so it's really good for us to be able to interact and figure out what you guys are really wanting to see. It also allows us just to chat back and forth, like I said. So if you haven't done that already, you can take a minute now just to do that.
And if anybody is joining us from home or from school, we've actually prepared some really engaging educational materials targeted at primary school students. So you can take a minute now. On the left-hand side of your event screen, there should be an Education Materials tab. Go ahead and look in there for some really interactive materials that our education coordinator, Victoria, has put together for us.
Yeah, lots of really amazing things for any students out there. So there is a chat box to the right-hand side of your screen that you can see. As I mentioned, you can type any comments or questions throughout the broadcast just in that little chat box. If you do, we really love that you put your first name, your age, and your location, which could be the name of your school, the home state, or even the country that you're coming from. This really helps us to identify you when we're responding to you, and you get a little shout out from underwater, which is pretty cool. So as I said, you're also going to be able to see our questions and polls pop up through the broadcast. As I said, this is a really, really great interactive experience, and it really helps us to shape the broadcast and sort of point it in the way that we see what you guys want to learn. One last thing I want to mention before we really dive right in is that I will be checking on the underwater team throughout the broadcast. If any of you are divers out there, you will know that this is just safe diving practice. It's absolutely nothing to be concerned about. We just like to check in on our buddies. So we're going to go ahead and start off by doing that. Katie, how are you and the team doing down there?
Let me just check, Fiona. I think that we're all doing good. Just asking everybody on the team down here. Yep, everybody's good and ready to get started showing you dive buddies this awesome reef.
Amazing. We also have a few people we want to shout out that are already tuning in. So we have students from Island Montessori and San Antonio, Texas. We also have people from Barnoldswick, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Lancashire in England, Tampa, Florida, Bloomington, Indiana, Colorado, and Diving with Heroes in Virginia.
This is awesome. People are joining us from all over the world right here at Eagle Ray Roundup. So hello to everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us. This is so sweet.
That's really, really cool, guys. We love to see you all, and we're super, super excited to have you with us. So as I said, for those of you online, we're super excited to be showing you these beautiful and delicate reef ecosystems here in Little Cayman, and we're super confident that the more you learn about them, the more you know about them, the more you are going to want to protect them. So Katie, can we begin by having a little look around where you are and telling us what you can see?
Absolutely. So the people that are already joining us have a very diverse background, from primary school age students all the way up to lifelong learners, all who have a connection with us here at CCMI, so we really appreciate you being here. And many of you may already know a bit about this incredible coral reef that we have behind us. But for those of you who maybe haven't had an opportunity to come to Little Cayman, this is just one of many of the coral reefs that are quite healthy that are lining the reefs outside of Little Cayman. And the building blocks of this reef, of course, are its corals. And there's many corals on this reef here, from these plating corals that are green and yellow and orange, to some yellow finger coral here underneath this little ledge. There's some soft corals here, some fire coral, and some great star coral as well. So the corals are the building blocks of this reef. And actually, this is a great opportunity for us to know a little bit about what you guys already know about coral. So tell us, using our poll in the interactive event page, it's on your right-hand side in the chat box. There should be a little red flashing light that says polls, and there we have a question for you. What is a coral? Is it a plant? Is it an animal? Or is it a rock? So take a moment and let us know what you think a coral is before we continue sharing with you some about this coral reef here.
Yes, and while we're waiting for you guys to send in those answers, we have a few more people who wrote in to tell us that they're watching.
Awesome.
So we have Sir John A. Cumber Primary School, who was actually here a couple weeks ago. We're super excited that you guys are joining us.
Nice.
We have Chris Tui, who's also joining us, and Taiwan and Nepal. So super far away. That's incredible.
Wow, this is really awesome, guys.
We love to see people from so far away. That's amazing. Now we are getting a couple answers coming in from our polls, so keep them coming, guys. We do love to hear what you think. But for now, we have a few people saying they think corals are rocks. We have a few people saying they think they might be animals, and also a couple people saying plants. And in some ways, you're actually all correct. So corals are actually hundreds to thousands of tiny colonial animals called polyps. They are actually closely related to jellyfish. I have a handy little model right here. This is a cross-section of a coral polyp. You can imagine it growing out of a big colony of coral, sort of like that, if that was whole. And a few of the different parts you can see on this coral polyp is you have the calcium carbonate skeleton under here, and then here is the coral polyp's stomach. So you have the coral polyp's stomach, then up here, that is the mouth and its tentacles. On these tentacles, you'll have these little stinging cells called nematocysts, again, super closely related to jellyfish. But what we want to talk about right now is how the coral polyp will use its tentacles to get food. So actually, we'll trap little particles out of the water column and pull it into its mouth using those tentacles. So that is one way that coral gets the food and nutrients that it needs. But that's actually not the way that it gets the majority of that food and nutrients. So Katie, do you think you could tell us a little bit more about how else a coral will get all of that nutrients?
Absolutely. So there's actually a great example of one of the corals with some larger polyps just over here. So if you dive buddies swim a little bit closer to the reef here, we have a great star coral. And this great star coral is kind of a reddish brown color. And it has, like Fiona said, it's a colonial organism. So each of these individual polyps works together to create this animal. And right now, each of these polyps has its tentacles retracted or closed. But at night, when it's feeding, the tentacles are out, and they're grabbing for these particles that are going by in the water column. But during the day, as you can see, they're pulled in. And this is because they're getting the majority of the nutrients they need actually during the day through a process known as photosynthesis. And this photosynthesis is working with tiny little microscopic bacteria inside the cellular tissue of this animal, and it's able to take the sunlight and convert it into all of the food or the energy that this coral needs. Well, not all of it, but about 90 to 95% of all the food that it needs comes from this symbiotic relationship inside of the zooxanthellae in this coral.
That's so right and so amazing. We do have two more little shout-outs. We keep getting them in. So we just want to say hi to Cayman Learning Center and also to Margie and Dennis in Pennsylvania. Hi, guys.
Hi, Margie and Dennis.
So yeah, that relationship is known as symbiosis, which, as Katie said, this is the two organisms working together and actually both benefiting from that relationship. So in this case, the zooxanthellae gets a home and also protection from any predators, and the coral is getting all that food and nutrients that it needs to survive and to thrive. So this is why you might say coral is both a plant and an animal living symbiotically. So Katie, could you explain why people might think coral is a rock?
Absolutely. So even though that coral I just showed you guys looks kind of soft and squishy, it's actually a stony coral. So we won't touch it, but if you did, it would feel very hard to the touch, like a rock. And this is because all of the stony coral species on this reef are what we call hermetic corals, or reef-building corals. And they have an internal skeleton very similar to our own human skeletons, which is made of calcium carbonate and aragonite. Over time, when the corals die, they leave behind this skeleton, and over thousands of years, these skeletons build up on each other, and over time, they create this massive limestone reef structure, which you see behind me. And that's why occasionally people think corals are just a colorful rock.
Yeah, and you can see again on this model here, so the part that Katie is talking about is this calcium carbonate skeleton. So corals are super cool, and I'm sure you guys will agree with us on that, and it's so incredible to me at least that these teeny tiny little colonial animals can create these huge reef structures so big that you can see them from airplanes and sometimes even from outer space, which is absolutely wild. So now that we have a better understanding of corals as being the building blocks of our coral reef, we want to look at some of the other things that you'll find on our reef. Katie, do you see any sponges down there?
I do see some sponges, but actually I see something really cool that we don't see here a lot. I want to show you dive buddies because we won't see them every day. So this is a soft coral, or gorgonian, right here, this purple kind of feathery thing moving through the water column. But actually, on the end of one of these branches is a free-swimming crinoid. So this crinoid is part of the echinoderm family, which is similar to sea stars and sand dollars and things like that because it has that 8-armed radial symmetry. And during the day, they find a spot like this on the reef to rest, but at night, they'll actually come off the reef and swim freely, sort of like a jellyfish does. So the fact that it's resting here, kind of grabbing on to this soft coral, is pretty awesome because you don't see these every day.
That's so awesome, Katie. Swimming crinoids are some of my favorite animals. If you ever get the chance to see them swimming, like Katie said, or you can even look up YouTube videos, they look
super rare.
Super alien. Really weird creatures, but beautiful. We do have a question coming in from Kate, who wants to know how old the reef is.
Oh, excellent question, Kate. This particular reef is probably around 10,000 years old, and these are a very recent geological reef system. But evidence has shown from research that some form of a coral reef has existed on Earth since before the dinosaurs. So, historically speaking, the reefs are some of the oldest living structures on our entire planet.
Yes, great answer, thank you. you see any around you?
Oh, yeah. There is actually one really cool sponge over here. If you dive buddies swim this way, it's a really beautiful sponge called a red octopus sponge. And I think it's named that because it has so many tubes and arms growing. But this right here is the octopus sponge. And sponges are critically important for reef health overall and for our oceans for several reasons. This particular species helps kind of hold the reef together, so it acts like a natural glue. It also has all these little nooks and crannies here that we can see.
Yeah, just on this tiny little coral outcrop in the Caribbean, we actually have 500 to 700 different species of fish, which is pretty amazing. Just a quick check-in, Katie. How are you and the underwater team doing down there?
Oh, that's a good idea, Fiona. I'm doing pretty good. Checking in with these guys underwater, and yeah, they're doing excellent, so we can go ahead and keep going.
Amazing. So we've talked a little bit about corals now and sponges. Are there any other cool examples down there of life that will contribute to a healthy reef ecosystem?
Well, it's great that Sophia asked about the fish, because up until this point, we've kind of discussed what are called sessile organisms, or organisms like corals and anemones that kind of live their whole life in one spot. But there's a ton of movement on this reef behind me, including the fish. And each fish is not just beautiful, but they each play a really important role on the reef as community members. Many of these fish are responsible for bio-eroding the reef. Many are responsible construction workers, building the reef up, and many are actually like lawn care workers, kind of mowing the lawn of all of the macroalgae, if you will. So each fish out here, like I said, they're not just pretty, but they're functional in their roles in this healthy reef system. And actually, this is a good time, again, to ask all of you dive buddies, let us know, what is your favorite fish? And do you know what role it plays on this reef? And if not, maybe Fiona or I can help you to learn a little bit about it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. And actually, while we wait for some answers, Katie, what's your favorite fish?
Oh, that's always a hard question. At the moment, I think, there's a butterfly fish right here. That's what I was going to pick. So come this way a little bit, and maybe we can see this four-eyed butterfly fish. It's kind of picking some of the algae off of the bottom of this yellow finger coral. It's right here.
This is your producer, Beth, jumping in. Let's see if we can get our camera person, Jenna, to get a little bit closer.
Of course, the fish is swimming away,
As
they
feeling
usually
a little
do.
shy and hiding.
But that's okay. The four-eyed butterfly fish, if it comes back out, you'll definitely be able to tell which one it is, because it's got yellow and black and white stripes on it, and it has a false eye spot on the back of its tail. And what's super cool about that is that if a predator tries to attack the four-eyed butterfly fish, it will likely attack the spot on the back of its dorsal fin before its actual eye, and allow the fish to get away with only a small injury instead of being eaten completely. So I really love those four-eyed butterfly fish for that reason.
Yeah, they're a super cool fish, and that's an awesome evolutionary adaptation.
Yeah.
We have a couple favorite fish coming in now. So Meredith from Pennsylvania says that she really loves parrotfish. And I have to agree with her. I also really love parrotfish. All of us at CCMI love parrotfish. They are a super crucial herbivore on our reef. You can think of them as sort of the lawnmowers of our reef, as Katie mentioned. That's their role on the reef. So what they do is they're nibbling away at all of this macroalgae growing on the reef, which is in direct competition with the corals that we have. But they actually grow a lot faster than the corals. So if you lose all of the parrotfish, then they're not going to be nibbling away at all that macroalgae, and the algae can grow over the coral and actually suffocate it sometimes.
Yeah, and actually, Fiona, we've got a good example up here by that great star coral. where the macroalgae is interacting really closely with it. So we can see here that right next to this great star coral, there's some Dictyota, or some Y-branching algae. And if we don't have enough herbivores on the reef, like parrotfish that are Merida's favorite, coming along and eating at that macroalgae, you can see how it starts to overgrow the coral. And so by these herbivores coming along and eating that, it kind of clears away a bit of space on the reef for those slow-growing corals to be able to have an opportunity to get more coral cover on the reef.
Yeah, and one last really cool thing about parrotfish while we're on the topic is, I'm sure some of you know, especially if you are living in the Caribbean or in Cayman, that a lot of our sand actually comes from parrotfish poop. So a single parrotfish can produce 450 kilos or 1,000 pounds of sand in 1 year, which is a whole lot of sand. So if you guys like hanging out on the beach, you're probably hanging out amongst old coral that's broken up, old seashells, but also a ton of parrotfish poop as well.
That's true, Fiona.
We have a bunch more favorite fish coming in.
Oh, nice.
Which is fantastic. So thank you guys so much for sending them. So far we have a sailfin blenny from Jill.
Ooh, sailfin blenny is good. I have not seen any sailfin blennies out here, but they're kind of a smaller fish, so I'll try to keep my eye out.
We also have Peter's favorite fish is a spotted drum. Hannah's favorite fish is a honeycomb cowfish.
Oh, nice.
Chris also loves parrotfish. Let's see. Candace loves sharks.
Ooh, nice one, Candace.
Those are all amazing fish, guys. Really cool. A really wide variety. That's amazing. We do have a few questions coming in as well.
Sweet.
So Jocelyn wants to know, what are we doing to help reef health?
Ooh, who asked that question?
Jocelyn.
Oh, Jocelyn. That is an excellent question. And actually, I think we're going to talk about one more topic before we move on. But when we do, we're going to talk a lot about not only what us at CCMI are doing as far as research and education, but also things that you, dive buddies, can do at home, no matter where you live, local in Cayman, regionally in the Caribbean, or internationally all throughout the world. There's a lot that each of us can do, so we're going to come back to that question.
Definitely, and also in our future broadcasts, we also touch more on that topic, so that's going to be definitely a reoccurring theme throughout our Reefs Go Live. Another question we have from Carrie is whether there are lionfish in Little Cayman.
Ooh. Unfortunately, there are lionfish in Little Cayman. I have not seen any on this dive. We're in Eagle Ray Roundup, and I haven't seen any today, which is great. But we have had them in the Cayman Islands for quite some time. The good news is we also locally have a really excellent culling effort. The Department of Environment within the Cayman Islands takes the initiative to train responsible divers who would like to help with this issue. They let you have a culling license, and they administer a special spear. And here in Little Cayman, a lot of the dive operators around the island will donate their boat time and their personnel and allow anybody who's certified to go out on a lionfish cull. So we're able to remove a high number of lionfish within the recreational dive limits and then share them with the community, because it's really excellent eating. So we do have lionfish, but we're doing our very best to make sure that we keep the population down as best we can.
Yes, and while we're on the topic of toxic creatures, Ryomi would like to know whether there are any poisonous corals on the reef.
Poisonous corals on the reef?
Yeah.
Well, corals are part of the Cnidarian family, which means they have those stinging cells and nematocysts like you talked about earlier, Fiona. But there's no coral down here that is poisonous. One coral you really want to watch out for, it's actually right here. It's called the fire coral. So maybe that's what you were wondering. Fire coral generally is a bright orange or rich yellow color. And occasionally, it's really hard to see, but they have these small tiny hairs on the fire coral, and if you were to touch it, which we never want to do, to any of these corals, but if you were to touch it, it would feel a burning sensation. And that's where you get the name fire coral from. So again, not poisonous, but definitely very uncomfortable to come into contact with.
Yes, we do have a few more questions. We'll try and answer a couple of them now.
Nice.
Matilda would like to know if you're scared of any of the fish.
Oh, Matilda, that's very kind. I'm not scared of any of the fish. I think once you interact with the ocean and in the water day after day, it's very big, and there's a lot of big organisms and big fish that live here, but when you start to learn more about them, you understand that they're just going about their daily life, and they may be curious about you and want to come up and check you out, but generally they come up and check you out. You can have this amazing moment with the fish, and then they keep going. So I'm very lucky that I'm not afraid of anything, because it's just about treating everything here with respect, and they seem to understand that.
I completely agree. And one last question we have from
Sure.
Chris, who wants to know what the most important fish on the reef is.
Oh, Chris asked that.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most important fish on the reef? Well, that's a really difficult question. And honestly, I think it depends on how you define important. But here in Little Cayman, first one that comes to mind is a Nassau Grouper. We're fortunate enough to have one of the only known viable spawning aggregation sites of Nassau Grouper right here in Little Cayman. And every year, people from the Department of Environment and Reef in Florida and California and Oregon, they all come here to study the Nassau Grouper spawning aggregation, and it's grown into the thousands. So this is an endangered species that we're all working really hard to protect. So I would say that's one of the most important ones. And you dive buddies might see one today. If you do, the Nassau Grouper can be quite big. They have some 3 stripes going down their face. Generally a striped body. They're kind of brown and white, so keep your eye out for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. We love Nassau Grouper and really hope we get to see some today.
Yeah.
And we have a final favorite fish, which actually segues nicely into our next topic, which is from Judy in the UK, who says that she loves stingrays.
Oh, stingray is a good choice, Judy. There were a couple stingrays out in the sand earlier, and we saw them doing what's called nuclear hunting. And nuclear hunting is when the stingray is sifting in the sand for food, and it's pushing out the waste that it doesn't want through the spiracles, or those big holes behind its eye. And usually with the stingray is a small barjack or a Spanish hogfish. And when the stingray pumps that waste out of its spiracles, that barjack is able to pick whatever it wants off of the waste from the stingray. It doesn't really affect the southern stingray at all, but the barjack is being a bit lazy and getting a free meal. So that's a cool behavior that you may see if you're snorkeling or diving on the reef.
Amazing. And sorry, did you mention cleaning stations just then, Katie?
No, I didn't, but you might be able to see those as well. We usually have a cleaning station somewhere on the reef, usually with a southern stingray or a Nassau Grouper, like I spoke about earlier. And these cleaning stations, you dive buddies keep your eye out. It's usually that large organism kind of sitting on the reef or staying stationary in one spot. And there's a lot of smaller organisms kind of coming all around it, picking off parasites and other particles that might be on it, or bacteria, and they're kind of getting a free meal. And they're getting a little bit of protection from predators, and that larger organism is getting to be cleaned. So that's another excellent example of symbiosis on the coral reef.
Yeah, there's lots of symbiotic relationships actually in our coral reef, which we love to see.
There are.
So do be keeping your eyes out, all of you, for maybe some parrotfish, all the different types of fish you guys mentioned and sent in, some stingrays, and also if you see any interactions behind Katie that could be a cleaning station. So keep your eyes peeled for those. and continue to ask us questions throughout. So one more thing we're just going to quickly talk about is actually abiotic factors, or the non-living environmental factors on our reef. And we want to be looking at how they interact or connect with the biotic or living creatures on our reef. So Katie, could you talk to us a little bit about some of the abiotic factors you might see here on the reef and how they affect it?
Absolutely. And so actually, if you dive buddies at home swim this way, we actually found something that I think would be super cool for you guys to see. And just around the corner of this reef here, earlier we found what is called a Hobo data logger. This is a device that many marine organizations around the world, including CCMI, we put out onto the reef to measure light intensity. And so it's just this very small pendant, and it's just here on the reef. And this little pendant is measuring that light intensity coming through the water column, as well as the temperature at this site. Of course, this is a permitted project through the Department of Environment, so we had to get permission to put this here, so you can't just zip tie things to the reef often unless you have clearance to do so from the government, but luckily we do, so that we can measure what's going on this reef. And the reason that we care about light intensity as an abiotic or a non-living environmental factor is because earlier we talked about that symbiotic relationship between that tiny microscopic algae called zooxanthellae living inside all of these stony corals and these soft corals. Without a decent amount of light, none of these corals could get that energy or the food they need to survive. But also, it's not just corals that rely on good light. There's also other organisms on the reef that have that symbiotic relationship. There's some sea anemones, there's some species of nudibranchs or underwater sea slugs, and all of them depend on there being good light on this coral reef. And also, without good light, we couldn't see all of the beautiful colors going on this reef all around us.
I agree. As a diver, we love the light and being able to see all of these gorgeous, gorgeous coral reefs in Little Cayman. So another important abiotic factor that we want to mention briefly is temperature. And with the atmospheric global temperature rising due to a buildup of carbon dioxide, we're also seeing a shift in the water temperatures, and they're also rising. And this is really not great for things like our corals, which are super delicate creatures and bleach super, super easily. And it's also not great for the growth of macroalgae. And as I said, macroalgae grows faster than coral, and it also thrives in these warmer water temperatures. So with them being in direct competition, the high growth of macroalgae and the delicateness and easily bleaching coral, that doesn't work out well in our favor for the environment. So I'm sure many of you already know that the planet is changing, and that a lot of that is to do with human action, but we can't lose hope yet, right, Katie?
Absolutely. It's really important that no one loses hope. And you don't just have to be a researcher or a scientist or work somewhere like CCMI to make a difference. There's so many people joining us today on this reef, and it's so incredible because they're from all over the world. Literally Taiwan to the States to Canada to Cayman. It's amazing. And every single one of you can make a positive impact on our environment and on our coral reefs, even if you don't live here. So we really implore you to do your very best. And actually, let us know what you're doing. This is another perfect time for you to chat with us, and let us know one way that you are trying to make a positive impact on our environment. We'd love to hear from you guys.
That's a great idea, guys. So just send in how you think you're minimizing your impact on the planet. And just quickly, we have a question from Sir John A. Cumbers, and they want to know, will coral die if you touch it?
The students of John A. Cumber, excellent question. They're over in Grand Cayman, so this is a pretty important question for them to know the answer to. And we've got many stony corals all around us. We've got a soft coral here, another great star stony coral here, and we never want to touch them. Corals are a very delicate animal, and if we were to accidentally hit one on the reef, it could damage them and it could kill them. So you want to be very gentle and make sure you stay far enough away that you don't accidentally hit them at any time. So excellent question.
Yeah, that's a super important thing to note. You can look, but you just don't want to be touching any of those corals. So while we're waiting for a few more answers to come in from you guys about how you minimize your impact on the planet, one thing you guys can think about is the 5 R's of sustainability, which are refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, and recycle. So I can go ahead to start off and tell you guys how I utilize the 5 R's in my life. So firstly, I refuse single-use plastic by using my handy-dandy reusable water bottle, which means I never have to buy single-use plastic water bottles. I reduce my carbon footprint by sticking to a plant-based diet and being a vegetarian, and actually as do a lot of the team members at CCMI, which is fantastic. I reuse things like Tupperwares and cloth bags instead of having to buy single-use plastic grocery bags or plastic takeout containers. I repurpose things like old t-shirts into rags so that I'm not using paper towel all the time. And if I am not able to do any of that and I end up having to use plastic or cans or other objects, that's when I'm going to try and recycle.
Oh, Fiona, those are all excellent ways that you are minimizing your impact on this environment. It really just warms my heart to know that so many of us on this team at CCMI we're not just here for a job. We're here because we're passionate about what we do, and we really care about the impact we have on this planet. So, good for you. I'm so stoked to hear that you do all that.
All right, let's see if we have anything from the community about how they minimize their impact on the planet. So we have Jana from the UK, who's told us that she uses her bike to get to work instead of using any motorized vehicle.
That's awesome. I mean, great way to minimize your carbon footprint, Jana, and it's really great for your exercise as well, so keep it up.
Yeah, that is an excellent way to minimize your impact. We are getting a little bit low on time here, but we do want to encourage all of you guys to keep up that good work and also to encourage your family and friends to also be minimizing their impact on the planet as much as possible. Now, this is a topic that's going to continue to come up throughout our upcoming Reefs Go Live broadcasts, where we're going to be speaking a little bit more about how reefs have changed over time and how they're continuing to change over time. We're going to be talking about the threats that they're facing now and going into the future, and we're going to highlight how all of us can help. So as humans, we are super reliant on our coral reefs, and because of that, and because of a lot of reasons, we really need to be treating them with the respect and the care that they deserve.
Absolutely, Fiona. Sorry, I got a little distracted because we have a little Nassau Grouper down here. It's just actually looks like he's getting ready to settle in at a cleaning station. So I know we're running low on time, but I thought this would be a great way to show you guys exactly what we were talking about earlier with this Nassau Grouper sitting stationary and waiting for those smaller organisms to pick its parasites off. So excellent timing for this guy.
That's amazing. I'm so glad we got to see that. That's super, super cool. Ooh, we do actually have a few ways people are minimizing their impact coming in really quick that we're just going to touch on. So Carson says that they pick up trash, which is wonderful. And Montessori says that they turn off lights, use less water, and pick up trash, which is absolutely wonderful.
I love it. Thank you, Montessori. Keep up the good work. That is crucial for the health of this coral reef. So, well done.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, I think Katie mentioned it a little bit of time ago, even if you do not live in Cayman or if you do not live by the ocean, all of us can have a direct impact on our planet. So all of the things that I mentioned that I do, those are not to do with living by the ocean. They're just all little things we can do in our everyday life. So that is all we have time for today. Unfortunately, I would love to keep talking to you guys for forever. But Katie, is there anything you want to add before we have to end?
I just want to say thank you so much to all of you joining us from literally all over the entire world today. This has been so exciting. We're so thankful to have you here, and I hope that you're leaving this reef feeling a little bit more inspired and hopeful for what the future holds, because really all of you can make a positive difference no matter where you are. So please continue to do your very best. We're all on this big, blue, beautiful planet together, and it's a team effort, so we need to be treating it with the care and respect that it deserves. So really thank you, and I hope to see you all again soon.
I wholeheartedly agree, Katie, and I think that is just the loveliest sentiment to finish up our first Reefs Go Live on. So I want to again thank all of you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you all on April 14th for our next installment of Reefs Go Live, which is going to be all about coral disease and bleaching, what happens when corals get stressed out, and how all of us can help. So thank you all so much, and we hope to see you all then.